it seems to me such a very narcissistic way of doing things to celebrate an anniversary, showing it to the world. Surely, if they really were as happy as she makes out, she wouldn't need to tell anyone. That's what it smacks of to me.
I cannot get away from the feeling that maybe Harry and Meghan feel differently about whether or not to show the children.
Do we get the idea that the life is good out there for the Sussexes?
But at the core of it, I think they know that they are nothing without each other. Harry's not built anything out in America. He's got nothing to fight for. He's got nothing to force him to restrain himself when he gets angry. She needs to start doing things that are inherently interesting rather than trying to do these shows that are basically pitching her friendships and her relationships.
What's going on here? Why are two of the most famous family feuds in the world? How are they so interconnected?
I think it's basically a wonderful newspaper story.
Brooklyn should think very hard about whether, if he is getting advice, about whether that advice is actually good advice.
Hello, I'm The Sun's royal editor, Matt Wilkinson, and this is Royal Exclusive. This week, Meghan and Harry hit the 7-year itch era, showing they are in a mood board for love. The Princess of Wales invites some good friends to Buckingham Palace after grabbing an award the Sussexes would have dreamed of. And why are the royal family taking opposing sides in the Beckham-Peltz family feud? Today we welcome to the studio royal biographer Ingrid Seward and Newsweek chief royal correspondent Jack Royston. Right guys, well it's happy 7th wedding anniversary to the Sussexes. They marked it, or rather Meghan marked it, on Instagram with a selection of photos, with a mood board of photos taken for the last couple of years, or the last 7 years, of their children and what appeared to be a happy family setup. What do you guys think that Meghan was trying to tell us in that mood board she posted on Instagram?
Well, one thing that's quite interesting is obviously there were pictures there from the wedding that, initially in Oprah, she said wasn't the real wedding. She kind of made a big fuss about it then. So I think she's reflecting the fact that actually she's looking back on that particular anniversary a bit more positively now. There's some pictures in there of her kids where you can kind of sort of see their faces. It's very, very, very small and not, necessarily a high-res image. But there's a little bit more comfort with showing her children there because obviously historically they've been very private about Archie and Lily. So I think she's generally putting across a much more positive, upbeat, happy impression than perhaps she has done at certain points in the past.
You're being very nice, Jack. You're being very nice. I take a more cynical view of this.
Please do.
And I think that Meghan is... I've never heard of someone doing a mood board for a wedding anniversary, but maybe it does happen now. But I think Meghan is just so Californian in everything she does. And that is not a criticism. That's the way they do things.
Yeah.
So probably it's completely normal. But I just think you can look, but you can't touch sort of thing. These are my children, but they're tiny, tiny pictures, so you can't see them. And aren't Harry and I happy? It seems to me such a very narcissistic way of doing things to celebrate an anniversary, showing it to the world. Surely, if they really were as happy as she makes out, she wouldn't need to tell anyone. That's what it smacks of to me.
Well, interestingly, because Instagram is the social media choice of people who want to portray a kind of overly realistic, happy representation of their life. That's the forum that everyone does.
Curation.
You go on Instagram and
yeah.
you think, wow, they've got an exciting life, and that's what Meghan has chosen to do by going on this platform.
It's almost like an Instagram grid in itself, isn't it? This mood board is almost like looking at an Instagram grid.
But it was on her Instagram, wasn't it? Yes.
There's some... I actually did enjoy looking back through some of the old pictures, not all of which were new. There were pictures there of their engagement. Do you remember the engagement photo shoot they did where Meghan was in that incredibly expensive dress? It was like the £80,000 dress.
Sitting very delicately on a step. That was a gorgeous photograph.
Yeah, those were lovely pictures. And that was, it kind of did actually take me back to the day when reporting on Harry and Meghan was a happy story and there wasn't all this conflict around the whole time because I remembered those moments. But then also there was the new pictures of Archie and Lily were interesting. But I cannot get away from the feeling that maybe Harry and Meghan feel differently about whether or not to show the children, and that's what's behind this kind of, compromised position where Meghan probably would rather just put pictures of their faces on Instagram and not worry too much about it.
But as we were saying earlier, Jack, we were discussing this earlier, saying this is a trend now of celebrities and even just normal people not showing their children's faces. And you said, actually, it was a really, really interesting. You said, well, actually, with AI and everything else and Instagram the way it is, do our kids really want their pictures out there? So 20 years' time, they're going for a job and there's some picture of them unwrapping a present.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. For some people, it's not actually about their own feelings of privacy. It's about wanting to give their children the right to decide, like wanting their children to be the ones who can choose whether they want their photos, whether they want their faces online or not. But I think one of the reasons Harry is so hardline about it is because obviously his upbringing, he was the most famous child face in Britain, probably the world. Everywhere him and William went, they would get recognised. And so he wants his children to be able to live, to be able to choose whether they want a quiet life or a life of fame and
Harry
fortune.
hated photographers, and he used to stick his tongue out at them. And occasionally Diana encouraged him to do that.
a bit mischievous.
This fits into, as you just pointed out there, Harry has he has stronger opinions on privacy and security than perhaps Meghan does. I was told a couple of years ago that there was a bit of this, debate between, as you pointed out there, between Harry and Meghan about how much they would want their children to be seen in the public. Whereas Meghan wants to, live like a billionaire. She wants to have a celebrity lifestyle in California. Whereas Harry wants to be a little bit more private. Where do we think we are 7 years down the line? This representation of their 7 years happy life and everything we see on Instagram, do we get the idea that the life is good out there for the Sussexes?
Well, you go first.
OK, I'll go first. I think that life in Montecito is pretty good. It's a very beautiful place. You have a very beautiful life. It's not probably terribly real, but it suits them. And I think they are probably very happy. That Harry is devoted to the children. And, a lot of people say, well, what does he do all the time? But if you've got a lot of legal cases running, as you know, Matt, because you work for a newspaper, so you know about legalities of things, it's not very peaceful and it's incredibly time-consuming and, and very upsetting. You could be on the phone to lawyers all morning. And Harry still has a lot of legal cases running. So I think that is defining his life wrongly at the moment. But I think his marriage is very happy.
I would agree on the marriage point. I think, they will have had their bumps because every marriage does. Like, it's not, there isn't a marriage out there where you never have arguments, you never have dips or low points. Absolutely all marriages do, and they will have themselves. And they've had some incredibly pressured moments, like how did Meghan feel when Harry put the frostbite story in his book and all of a sudden they were being ridiculed in America? Like, it must have put a huge amount of strain and pressure on the relationship.
Well, what about the time he described how he lost his virginity in a field?
In a field, but then also, how did Harry feel when Meghan did the fake curtsy on the Netflix show? He might well have felt quite upset about her doing that. So I'm sure that they have had their moments, but at the core of it, I think they know that they are, they are nothing without each other in reality. They need each other, and they have a great, objectively on paper, a fantastic life out there in a beautiful part of the world. 2 beautiful children, hobnobbing with all of these big power players from the world of Hollywood. But some people, they take their problems with them, and I think that's where Harry is right now. And Harry has not built as much in America as Meghan has.
And also when he gave that interview, sorry to bang on Matt, to the BBC, he looked really.
He looked so angry.
He looked so. Harry is very emotional and gets very, very, very angry, and
he's a hothead.
He's very intense. He's got the Spencer temper.
Yeah.
And they all have it. They all have it.
But this is the thing is, I was thinking to myself, why has he done this with the BBC interview? And I couldn't get away from the fact that Meghan didn't do this and doesn't do this kind of stuff because Meghan has built this whole thing in America with her lifestyle brand and her new Netflix show and her podcast. And because she's built this new thing, she doesn't want to wreck it and she doesn't want to ruin it. So she's got something she's fighting for. Harry's not built anything out in America. He's got nothing to fight for. He's got nothing to force him to restrain himself when he gets angry. And so I just cannot get away from the fact that the solution to most of Harry's problems actually is just to build something fantastic in America that people can get excited about and stop, and then he will be able to let go of the past. But I think
Well, I think you should be his new advisor.
Well, he doesn't listen to his advisors. So.
We give Harry and Meghan advice every week on this show. I can confirm that I don't think they listen to or take away any of the advice. But we become body language experts in many ways, don't we? We become or looking at pictures or reading things into how we see the couple acting and the consequences of their actions. You discussed. I mean, I say the BBC interview was cataclysmic for their strategy.
Yeah.
Because there was an opportunity there for the reconciliation.
A 2-year strategy blown up in one interview.
It was absolutely dreadful idea. But going back to the mood board, going back to how their kind of life is there, are we agreeing there's kind of no 7-year itch then? I mean, things are moving on quite well as far as we're aware. I did a story this week saying that Harry would never leave Meghan, but obviously they've gone through. They've had between them. There's been a lot of sacrifices.
I think that they are dependent on each other, though.
Yeah,
totally. Well, that's what you said, Jack.
Yeah, I agree.
So we are in total agreement. They are very dependent on each other.
There was this story that Meghan, had her people approach someone about a divorce book. But I mean, imagine if Meghan left Harry, it would destroy her reputation. She would be eviscerated publicly because she's already slipped into this kind of category on social media. The way that pop culture commentators talk about her, they lump her in with Amber Heard. They lump her in with, these other famous women who are perceived as being narcissistic or, being controlling of their husbands. Alec Baldwin's wife got this treatment the other day. Blake Lively as well. So if she walked out on Harry, she would never reputationally survive it. But then Harry, without Meghan, what's his life in America going to be like?
Well, he wouldn't leave the children, you see. And in America, the rules about children, they're always with the mother, nearly always.
Yeah.
So I mean, so it's not going to happen. So do you remember 5 years? Everyone, when they got married, a lot of members actually of the royal family even said it won't last 5 years, but it has.
It has.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
lasted 7.
Yeah.
Through a lot of crises, through a lot of
huge pressure.
You talk about some strategic errors. I mean, that would be a major strategic error on Meghan's behalf, basically, if we looked at it strategically.
Yeah, and obviously you can't just look at your marriage strategically because you live it daily. But strategically, it would be a catastrophic mistake.
Interesting.
And I think I think she does need Harry. I think she does, and she must know by now that she doesn't get everything right.
Yeah. So we're behaviour experts. We're marriage experts.
But without Harry,
we're allowed to.
She is nothing.
She's nothing, and without her, Harry's life in America is nothing.
Well, yes, exactly.
He has a reputation to fall back on.
So they have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, they need each other.
Yeah.
Now, one thing Meghan does do without Harry is her podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm open that I rarely listen to it. I know we spoke the other day, Jack, and I said, have you been listening to the podcast? And me and you were kind of, we listen to it on high speed, or that we do pay attention to it, but we're probably not the target audience. It's the penultimate episode that's just occurred this week. Is it succeeding? Enough people watching it? Is it working for Meghan?
So one big question here is, what did she expect it to be? Does she need it to be top 10? It's not top 10. It has, the first episode or two when we were all writing loads of news lines off the back of it, that got into the top 10. It very quickly dropped out again. It's now not even in the top 200 on Apple. It is in the top 100 business podcasts, somewhere in the 60s. So it's not hugely well listened to. But
the publicity around it is amazing.
Well, not so much anymore. I think, as I say, I think the journalists are kind of turning off.
Every day people are writing about it. I mean, I'm out of the news world, and I promise you, people never stop writing, and I look at it and I think, well, Netflix or the podcast or Meghan must be delighted. She may not have the hits of people watching it, but gosh, she's had some amazing publicity.
So does it serve the purpose that it gives deeper insights into her life rather than this idea of being an entrepreneur? She often throws little nuggets on. I think this week she was talking about how having children was not how she envisioned it. Is that the idea, that she's giving a little glimpse into Montecito?
Yeah, I think the comment about the children, where she was saying she thought before she had Archie that she was going to have him on her hip while she was giving speeches as a royal, so she would be going to a royal event and Archie would be with her, which obviously never happened. So that was what she was saying. She the life of parenting was not what she envisaged.
But she only had to look at other royal mothers to know that
it's not possible.
It's a no-go, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just not possible.
How lovely it would be, but it's a no-go. You can't.
Yeah.
have the kid on your hip and be giving speeches in the royal world. You can't in any world, really.
No, but I think the podcast is most interesting when she gives details about her life, certainly to us, but like I'm not the founder of a business, maybe if I was the founder of the business, I would be more interested in that side of things. I think though, it's quite a niche world, like business podcasts, there are a lot of them. A lot of them are about investing for the very simple reason that anyone can do it. You have to have some money. Obviously you can't invest if you don't have any money, but as long as you do, it's relatively straightforward and people need advice, like they need specific concrete advice about how to invest. So that's why a lot of business shows focus on that.
So it's not actually what you're saying, Jack, is that Meghan's podcast isn't actually really giving us any kind of advice.
I think that it's a niche audience of people who are founder, you would have to be a woman who was the founder of a new business. So if you are a female founder of a business, but you did it 10 years ago and you're up and running, like you're not necessarily going to get that concrete advice. But I also think it's quite sparse on advice anyway. Yeah. And I think what Meghan needs to do really is I think these shows that she's been doing that are about her shining as a personality are putting too much pressure on her when actually there's been a big backlash against her. And she needs to start doing things that are inherently interesting rather than trying to do these shows that are basically pitching her friendships and her relationships with, because all the guests have been her friends.
Whereas they've been light on interesting friends, this one. Remember, Archetypes had some bigger names, had like Paris Hilton and all sorts
had
of
big
people
famous
people. This time,
we
it's all
haven't
been
heard of
business
them here,
leaders.
have we, necessarily?
I don't think many people have heard of many of them.
I don't think
I think
Kitch
you're
is a
being
big
very
brand.
fair. I think you're actually putting across a really good argument for her. Not being behind.
Jack always does. He gets in trouble for it. No, but you mentioned about the businesses there. I think one thing, do you notice this week that the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales were named in Time magazine? It's a very influential list. They were innovators of, now this is a difficult word, of philanthropy, modernising royal philanthropy. Now, this is, I think, in recognition of all the work they're doing with, William's been doing with homelessness through Homewards. Catherine, I've been to so many events where she's launched something new about Shaping Us or her Royal Foundation. There's so much going on there. They're working with loads of businesses from NatWest to Deloitte to Co-op to the sandwich firm Pret a Manger. They're doing lots behind the scene that doesn't really get that much coverage, but they've won this. They've been named as innovators and also modernising the way that royals work. This is probably an award that Archwell or the Sussexes maybe would have dreamed of.
But the thing about what that William and sorry, was it his go?
No, you go for it.
That they're doing, I think, is they're looking long term rather than immediate cheers. You've done this, you've done that. This is long term. So I think that Kate's childhood, the first 5 years, is absolutely brilliant. But it's long term. Earthshot is long term. The homelessness, sadly, is long-term. So they're not looking for the immediate kick. They're looking sort of forward into the future about what they can do. And I think that's really admirable, which is probably why it doesn't get that much publicity.
So there's a long-term strategy that you can see. We know how long Earthshot is, we know how long Homewards is, we know that Shaping Us and the work with the under-5s is basically her lifelong. It's going to last all her life. It's a golden thread through all her work. Whereas the Sussexes, and we always compare them, whereas the Sussexes seem to be jumping around from different ideas and you can't pin down specifically what they are doing philanthropically.
I could only think of the Invictus Games. And most people say that when you think of the Sussexes, you think of Harry's Invictus Games. I can't think of anything that Meghan has done or is going to do. So
I think William and Kate are being very ambitious with their projects. Absolutely agree with you on the long-term strategy, but also, ending homelessness is hugely ambitious. Finding projects to help stop climate change, hugely ambitious. They're trying to tackle the big questions of our time in a way that strays quite close to politics, really. They haven't got in trouble, I don't think, for crossing the line. But these are stepping into areas where government usually treads. Kate's Shaping Us project fills in the gap left by the Sure Start scheme that was rolled back under the previous government, where there was a lot of help for parents with children preschool age, and a lot of that help was withdrawn. So Kate stepped into the vacuum, she stepped into the gap and started trying to refocus attention on that age, on that era of a child's life. So it's hugely
But that was
ambitious.
because she reckoned that if you can take a child up to the age of 5, you've
got them up and running,
You've got them up and running.
Yeah.
And these are positive, optimistic ideas, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's no navel gazing here.
No,
These are things that are positive, and we can hopefully see some success over a long period of time.
And absolutely. And with Harry and Meghan, I think part of the issue is that they just do a lot less charity work. You know, they don't do visits to charities anymore, to external charities. And, you know, they have had the Archewell Parents Network they launched in recent years, which was there to kind of be a support network for parents who, have lost children because of social media, which is a valuable and a valid project to do, but they're just very hands-off with all of their charity work.
Well, Centre Barley, that wouldn't have helped his cause.
African parks.
African parks, everything
Because
else.
we know that Harry and Meghan are trying to do something about social media.
Yeah.
But we don't really know what they've done. I know they've talked about it, but what have they actually done?
It's not results focused. This is what I would like to see them do with that project. Is
very business results focused.
No, but like, what are they trying to do? They're trying to create a support network, but parents want to know. Like, a lot of parents feel completely helpless. You know, they've given their children social media. They probably should have waited a couple of years, but once you've given it, it's hard to take it back. What do they literally do? Like, how do you cope with that situation? I would much rather see Harry and Meghan try to give concrete advice to parents on how to deal with that situation. But they,
Not to read it all, which we know Harry does.
But
he certainly used to. I don't know if he still does.
Yeah, but also absolutely 100%. But also steps for social media back off your children. Like, how do you wean them off it? Can you take it back? What's the best way of approaching how to do that? I think there's more they could be doing that would actually create an impact for a broader section of people in the real world, which is what William and Kate are aiming to do. They're aiming to have a real world impact.
Well, it looks to me, and from going to these events and listening to them talk and explain, it looks to me like they are succeeding in this world, in the projects they're running. They are, we do have a time scale, so we will come back to William after 10 years of Earthshot and say, what has it done?
Yeah,
what has it achieved?
what are the best?
5 years after Homewards, what have you done? But, we look forward to that, to see what the kind of results are. But the Time magazine were talking about that the Wales they describe modernising royal philanthropy. Royal philanthropy has been going on for roughly just over 100 years, I think we're talking, where royals actually started getting involved. Are they the real, true modern royal couple here on the stage with all the work that we've just described here, William and Catherine?
I think William and Catherine are the true modern royal couple now. But if you look back, Princess Margaret, for instance, who people hardly even think about now, she was the first person to actually touch someone that had AIDS.
Correct, yeah.
And of course, and then there was leprosy back in the day. But things it wasn't glamorous enough for the 50s and 60s. They wanted to see Princess Margaret in a sort of wonderful dress. But they did do work. And Queen Mary did an immense amount of work, going really for, George V was so proud of his wife because she did a huge amount with nursing and everything else. But it wasn't the world was so different then. So I think they've kind of revived the old-fashioned royal philanthropy in a way. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I do. And look, King Charles as well, the King's Trust is a fantastic project, and it's a very ambitious project. I was out in New York a couple of weeks ago for the King's Trust Global Gala, and I was speaking to Oswald Boateng, a fashion designer, who was big at the Met Gala. He was one of the big designers who was dressing people at the Met Gala this year, who was helped by the King's Trust. The King's Trust got him up and running. He got a grant from them. He used it to buy his kind of sewing machines and equipment. Charles sometimes doesn't perhaps get quite as much credit as he deserves, I think, for the ambition that he's shown in an area that I certainly would say counts as philanthropy. I think it does. It is charity.
Totally,
it's charity work. Yeah. It's very important getting young people into work and helping them get set up.
He was the first. Charles, in a way, was the first to do it, wasn't he?
He carved out this
version. When he started, his inner cities.
Yeah.
With trying to do some stuff for kids in the inner cities using his Navy pension pay.
Yeah.
So
and that he came out
started
of the
it.
Navy and he needed a purpose in life,
Yeah.
isn't it? And this was
So he started the Prince's Trust.
Well,
Yeah.
this is a real good recognition of all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, because we see the engagements, report on the engagements, we see them turning up, but there is a lot of work they do behind with these Royal Foundation and the King's Trust, as we're pointing out. They do actually, they're not just sitting around in Palace just counting all their money. There's a lot of work behind for these philanthropic efforts. Jack, also, or both of you, also on the list was David Beckham. So he also made the Times 100 list. And guys, what's going on with Beckham, the Beckhams and the Peltzes and the Royals? So the Sun we had a story, it's our front page last week, where Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz had gone to Montecito and had a lovely dinner with Harry and Meghan. What's wrong with this? Well, there are two very distinct family feuds going on. And Harry and Meghan, we are told, cozied up, bonded with Brooklyn and Nicola over their feud with David and Victoria. At the same time, Kew Gardens, Charles and David Beckham, who is an ambassador of the King's Trust, had a lovely chat. We were listening to it. They were talking about presents. They were talking about roses. What's going on here? Why are two of the most famous family feuds in the world? How are they so interconnected?
I think it's basically a wonderful newspaper story.
It is.
It
It's
really-
great for us to watch.
It's a great story. And
It's such a collision, isn't it?
I think often when there's really terrible things going on in the world, which there are now, I mean, there always are, but they're particularly bad now, people just, they don't want to read about it. They want to read something that's fluffy, and somebody super rich and a king is having a bad time with their children, because everyone, as we were saying earlier, everyone has a period when they have a bad time with their children. And I think it is such a relief to read something that is, in a way, it's quite funny. In a way, you can relate to it because of family feuds. And it's also rather fascinating that the Beckhams' son, Brooklyn, who was their firstborn, has sort of sided with his wife against the family. In a way, we're looking at Harry, who was, not firstborn, but sided with Meghan against the family.
Well, they're very similar. They're always, quite similar setups. Why do we think that Harry and Meghan would want to become friends with Brooklyn and Nicola? What's in it for them? Are they just a shoulder to cry on, giving advice, or is it some new unit?
I think it's the other way around, Matt. That Brooklyn and Nicola want to become friends with Harry and Meghan because Harry and Meghan are settled in Montecito. They are the most famous people, like them or not, and of course a lot of people really don't like them. They are the most talked about people in that Hollywood scene.
So Harry and Meghan could almost become like a blueprint.
I don't know.
Well, I think if it's going
that.
down that road, I think Brooklyn needs to really seriously ask himself whether he does want this issue resolved, because Harry and Meghan have not succeeded in resolving anything with the royal family. I think, from David Beckham's point of view, he has been courting the monarchy for a very long time. And he has, he's a long-standing supporter of the king. And that probably explains his, he looking very dapper at Chelsea. They loved his suit jacket. But that explains his connection with the king. But Brooklyn and Nicola Peltz clearly have absolutely lapped up the opportunity to get to know Harry and Meghan, and no doubt, probably were sharing some notes. But Brooklyn needs to be very careful, because family is so important, and he has not lost his family yet. But he could. And life is long, and he's got to ask himself how he'll feel in 20 years' time if he's lost his relationship with his family.
Yeah, it's not a blueprint to follow.
And apparently, well, I think I probably read it in The Sun, that David Beckham, of course, he had a big fallout with his father.
Oh.
You didn't write that, Matt?
That wasn't me, but I'll take credit for it if you liked it.
Yeah, and that lasted for years, and he just cannot believe that this is happening again, so he's sort of super upset.
Yeah, family rifts are relatable, aren't they? I mean, it happens to everybody, but to see the two big celebrity couples going this way, it's crazy.
You would think that somebody who is so big would be able to find a solution to these problems, because you could go and you could just speak to, a therapist, like you'd have the money to speak to a therapist or a counsellor or whatever, but it just doesn't go that way. It comes, I think, from people being very set in their ways, and, Harry and perhaps Brooklyn maybe have both just got very rigidly set in a particular mentality that they can't get out of.
Do you think it's an error? I mean, it was. I don't think this story was meant to come out. We found it and we published it. I think they would have rather it didn't. But do you think it's an error for Harry and Meghan to cozy up and be friends with Brooklyn and Nicola?
I don't think it's anything to do with us. I really don't. I think that's very. I think I wouldn't feel happy commentating on that. Who they can be friends with.
I have no problem with them being friends with Brooklyn and Nicola Peltz, but I think Brooklyn, and if Brooklyn and Nicola want to be friends with them, then fair enough. But I think Brooklyn should think very hard about whether, if he is getting advice, about whether that advice is actually good advice. And Meghan was giving advice to Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, who did pull out of the world of tennis. And I'm not an expert on tennis, but I don't think she is still. She was a legendary, iconic.
What was Meghan's advice?
Well, we don't know exactly what Meghan said, but Naomi Osaka pulled out. She was an absolute set up to be a iconic female tennis player, and she packed it all in because the anxiety was too much for her. And I cannot help but wonder whether she might also look back and wonder, think of what I could have achieved. Life is difficult. Life is really, really difficult. Anxiety is super difficult, and a lot of top flight sports, athletes and sports people do experience that. But it's a small window of your life, and would it have been better to just keep going? But we don't know what Meghan told her. Maybe Meghan told her to get back, to stop moaning and pick your tennis racket up.
We'll never know.
Meghan, doesn't sound like Meghan, no.
Now at Kew Gardens, we mentioned about David Beckham quite close, well, not courting the royals, but he's become a friend with the king. They've dined at Highgrove. He's become an ambassador. David's sent some honey to the king. We were overhearing a conversation, and it appeared to be a gift or a present had been shared, or that the King and Queen had possibly sent something to the Beckhams, and David Beckham was wearing the King's rose.
It was for his 50th birthday, wasn't it?
It was his 50th birthday the other week, yeah. Do you think there are gifts shared there between the King and Queen and the Beckhams?
Well, I thought, obviously he's given her the new David Austin rose, which is the King's rose, really beautiful. But then it appears that wasn't the case, but no one's going to confirm or deny it, so I don't think we're ever going to know. And then I thought, if maybe he sent 50 rose bushes to David Beckham, but you'd think David Beckham would have thanked him, not just personally, but would have just written him a very nice letter.
Yeah, probably should have done, really.
And then they were saying, did you get it? Did you get the roses, Camilla said.
Which is what you ask when you haven't had the thank you card.
Did you get my lovely... Did you get the flowers I sent you?
Basic protocol, not just royal protocol, basic protocol. If you get a present, send a thank you letter. Well, just briefly, back to the Princess of Wales. Some wonderful photographs and video of Catherine at the Buckingham Palace garden party. It was the last one at Buckingham Palace this year. And we were waiting for William and Catherine. Hopefully, they would have turned up to earlier ones. But it was great to see them. Jack, you're a big fan of the Buckingham Palace garden party? You've both been.
We've been, yeah. Have you been? I've been.
I have been, but not recently.
For years.
I have to
say.
Same. Well, I wasn't going to say not for years. I'm really old.
But she met Liz Hatton. This is someone that she's become close to, or became close to, before she died last year. She had a cancer, and they shared this amazing hug at Windsor Castle, and I think she'd gone there for a bucket list option where she was taking photographs, and Kate surprised her and gave her a lovely hug, and she stayed close with the family. It was a really nice moment. I just want to get your thoughts on this kind of lovely, soft moment where Catherine was chatting to the parents and the
child brother. Liz Hatton's brother is a young boy. He's very cute. He looked great in his suit.
I thought that was absolutely gorgeous, and that is what Catherine. Another one of the things that Catherine does so beautifully. And the hug at Windsor Castle went all over the world. That picture, it was just gorgeous. And there she is again talking to the family. But of course, she wouldn't have necessarily spotted them. Someone would have told her. They do have people helping them. And
well, they invited them, Ingrid. So they invited a whole bunch of their friends.
But when they were actually there, someone would have guided them there over there, yes.
Yeah, so they invited, there was Stephen Frank, Holocaust survivor that she'd worked with in the past, and lots of other people connected with the charities. But this is what the Buckingham Palace Garden Party is for, right? It's to reward people that in their sphere of interests, or people that they feel have done good jobs over the years, that they want to bring to the palace, open up the back garden and have a little bit of a party.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, isn't it? You can come back, you get your pictures, and you get to meet. They create these huge lines of people, and then the royals go down the line and they meet everyone.
And if you're not in the line, you might as well not be there.
Yeah, that's all right. I was 2 or 3 rows back, unfortunately.
But the food is, there's some nice glass or something, and a nice little some canapé. You can have some
very delicate sandwiches.
Some very delicate sandwiches, exactly. So it's a lovely day when the weather's good. Obviously, it's slightly less fun when it's raining. But
Just quickly, we saw the new photograph of Queen Camilla's dog, Molly. So this is just taken from Battersea Dogs Home. It was a rescue pup. It was to replace her previous dog that had died. The royal family have a long history with dogs. I don't want to go into too far back into the history, or too long, but Molly is a welcome addition to the royal family and the long history of their association with pet dogs, Ingrid.
Well, Camilla has always liked Jack Russells, always had Jack Russells. And this little Molly, who looks completely adorable, is a rescue from Battersea, and a Jack Russell cross with what, I'm not sure. But she said when she got him as a pup, he looks like a mole, so she called him Molly. And of course, Charles has a much more exotic Italian truffle hunter called Snuff, who he's apparently obsessed with. But the royals and dogs do go back. Obviously, we know all about the Queen's corgis and the pack of corgis. At one time, she had 7 corgis, so they were a real pack.
Well, Ingrid, you mentioned about the corgis. Have you seen the interview or the words from Sarah Ferguson in the last couple of days?
A very Fergie comment. This is
a very Fergie comment. I'll read it out to you. So she her and Andrew got given the late Queen's corgis, and they look after them at Royal Lodge. And she was speaking at a Creative Women Platform forum, and she said, "I have her dogs, Queen Elizabeth II's. I have her corgis, so every morning they come in and go woof woof, and I'm sure it's her talking to me."
I mean, even for Fergie, that's a bit far-fetched.
Bit much.
I think that she probably likes to think that. But of course, you know, these two, Andrew gave these dogs, or at least one of them, to the Queen as a puppy. So the Queen couldn't possibly reincarnated it in a...
But it shows how close possibly Sarah Ferguson was with the late Queen Elizabeth II, or it shows how close she wants us all to know that she was close to.
I think probably a bit of both, but she was very close. The Queen really adored Fergie because Fergie made her laugh, and Fergie's a very, very kind person. And, you know, they love horses and the country and dogs, and they used to go walking together. So and most important of all, Fergie was looking after her favourite son. So there was no reason for her not to love Fergie, but I don't think Fergie needs to keep reminding us. But she wasn't, you know, she was talking at a talk. And, you know, you can't be careful of everything you say, and she probably thought it would make people laugh.
Which it did.
It was probably meant in jest, yes.
Yeah, and taken with a bit of a pinch of salt. People do have ways of remembering people, isn't it? And she will, of course, she's reminded of the Queen when she sees them.
Like when people see a little robin,
you
know, they think, oh, well, that's my dead mother come back to say good morning to me. Yeah,
and people wear clothes of people they've lost as well, don't they? They will sometimes wear, you know, an item of clothing that reminds them of that person. So, yeah.
And just finally, we have a lot of Canadian viewers. So I want to mention the King and Queen's upcoming trip. It's literally 24 hours. They're in and out. I think there's up to about 10 engagements. I had a little look at the list yesterday, and we're waiting for it all. I'm flying out to Canada. We have a lot of Canadian viewers here. Are we excited? Should people be excited about the King and Queen going to Canada? Very short trip. He's going to be the first king to open Parliament since 1950, or the first monarch since 1957. But there's a bit of politics surrounding this. We had some comments yesterday, I think, from the High Commissioner saying that maybe the King should speak out against Donald Trump's plans
they'd love that,
buy Canada. Yeah. What do you think,
I'm not
Jack?
sure what Keir Starmer would think, but the Canadians love it. Look, King Charles has been in such a difficult position because he's been walking this diplomatic tightrope where Keir Starmer has walked into the Oval Office and sat down with Trump and said, here's an invite from King Charles. It's such a privilege for you to be invited for this second historic state visit. And Canada is sitting back watching there thinking, well, hold on a minute, he is threatening to annex us at the moment. So this is probably, I think, the most complex and fraught diplomatic ball that Charles has ever had to play. A lot of what he's been doing so far is, you know, Keir Starmer has asked him and some of the messaging that he's done to support Canada, which has been so much more subtle and so much more missable than Keir Starmer's letter to Trump.
I think it's been meaningful, though. He has been quite clever. There's been certain ways. I think it's a Flag Day. I'm probably going to get the day wrong, but he's had Mark Carney. Mark Carney's come to see him, the new Prime Minister. He has. But it is a diplomatic tightrope.
Very subtle.
I'm going to be fascinated by his speech, because he's going to make a speech in the Parliament, which is written by the government. It's passed, you know, the government see it and say, yes, we like this, or we don't like that. So it's going to be a really interesting 24 hours, a really short trip where so many political issues the other side of the pond are really going to have to be spoken about.
But Charles, the King, I beg his pardon, cares deeply about he won't let people put words in his mouth completely. So although obviously the speech is written by the government, he always puts a little bit of personal intonation into it. And I think he's just a brilliant speech maker. And I have no doubt that he will handle this absolutely perfectly. He's King of Canada.
Well, he has a lot of affection for Canada and Canadians as well. So.
Oh, absolutely. And he can't just pull the gloves off and start directly referencing Trump, because, you know, he would get in trouble. But there might be something sewn in there about the importance of Canada's history and its, you know, its own identity as its own unique country. But he, you know, actually, despite the fact that Mark Carney did say in a recent interview that Canadians were a bit upset about the invite for Trump, actually Charles remains Canada's secret weapon in this battle that it's in with Trump, because if Trump were to go completely bonkers and send the army into Canada, he would be taking a country that counts Charles as head of state.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fascinating to say. I'm going, so I'll report back next week after a very long but short journey. Right, we've just got time for our quick fire questions, everybody, so take a deep breath. What photo would you add to Meghan's 7-year anniversary mood board?
I would add there was a really beautiful picture that was of Meghan walking down the aisle on the wedding day. It was shot from above, it was wide, and you could see the whole of St. George's Chapel, the whole of the congregation, but there was just one kind of ray of sunlight coming in through one of the windows and shining on her, and I thought it was such a beautiful image that is the picture I
would have liked it. Did that have King Charles, or then Prince Charles, walking her down the aisle?
I think she did half of it by herself and half of it with Charles. I have a feeling it was the half she did by herself, but it was a beautiful moment when the King walked it down the aisle.
Exactly. Ingrid?
Well, I just think it's got to be something with Harry, because it's all about her and Harry. Sorry, Meghan, it's about Harry too. So I would add a picture of her and Harry, and preferably taken from the front, not the back. But I can't actually think of one. But there are some gorgeous pictures. They're both very photogenic. And I think that it needs just something that you could see, not a tiny picture, something a bit bigger.
Well, it is a love story, as they told us on their Netflix series. That's what it's all about, an ongoing love story. Second question. It was revealed the King sent a birthday gift to David Beckham, or some kind of gift to David Beckham. What gift would you have sent Bex if you were King Charles?
Well, he doesn't need any more homes. He probably doesn't need any... Well, actually, I know what I would have sent him. I would have sent him probably one of the Queen's shooting dogs, puppies, which they're still there. They're still bred at Sandringham. And I think that would be a puppy from the King would be... Well, maybe I'm thinking because the King was given a puppy.
Yeah, and he lives in the Cotswolds.
He lives in the Cotswolds, and I'm sure he has ambitions about shooting and gentleman's pursuits. So I think a puppy, a Labrador puppy.
Jack?
I think the King should make Sandringham available for the latest Sandringham summit between Brooklyn, David, and just thrash it out the way the Royals did. They could have it on the same day in January next year.
What a wonderful idea, because it worked out so well last time.
Worked out so well for them, yeah.
Great, and final question. If the late Queen really does talk to Sarah Ferguson through the corgis, what do you think she's saying?
She would be saying, darling, thank you for supporting my son. And I love you very much, and I know you love him very much, so please carry on and look after him for me.
That's a lovely sentiment. Thank you, Ingrid. Jack?
I was just going to say, she'd say tone it down a little bit, which is slightly less compassionate, but there we are. I was compassionate earlier in the show, so we can switch.
You're allowed to be a cynic.
Yes.
We take turns.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, guys. We covered a lot, had a lot of fun, so I really appreciate all of your thoughts and insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, that's all we have time for on this week's Royal Exclusive. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments as we do read them, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next week.